Welcome, everybody, to the Best Fleets to Drive For podcast. I'm Mark Morrell, co-founder of Carrier's Edge and co-creator of the Best Fleets to Drive For program. And I am joined today with one of my favorite people to interview, one of the most interesting people in the entire community of Best Fleets to Drive For, Mr. Andy Winkler of Chief Carriers. Hi, Andy. How are you doing today?
Mark, I'm doing great. Appreciate you having me on.
So Andy has already put me to shame with the quality of his video background and microphone. But that is, as we will discover throughout the session today, pretty typical. What I have known of Andy ever since we've known each other is that he always does everything over and above and puts everyone else around him to shame. So let's start. What is significant about you, as anybody following the Best Fleets program knows, is that you have not only been part of a Best Fleets effort at two different companies that got them into the top 20, you've been an overall winner at two different companies. So you obviously have a process, you obviously have a method and things that you do. And so we want to dig into that a little bit today. But let's start by talking about why you got into the program in the first place. What brought you into the Best Fleets to Drive For program?
Geez, I remember it pretty distinctly. It was probably back in about 2012, at least for that Best Fleets year. So it might have been the fall of 2011. But I saw a decal on the back of a Fremont contract carriers truck. And it said best Fleets to Drive For. And I thought, well, what the heck is that? I hadn't heard of it. So I did some research and kind of dug it up and I figured it out. I was like, you know what? I think I want to be a part of this. So 2012 was the first year that we entered the contest with my former company, Grand Island Express. And they've obviously figured it out and done well over the years as well. So that was the beginning.
Okay. And when you first got into the program, how did you approach it? Did you have a particular method that you were following, or something that you were looking to do when you went in there, or you just sort of went in to see what it was all about?
Yeah, I didn't know anything about it at the time. So, of course, you had to come up with somebody to nominate you, a driver willing to nominate you to get you in the program. And once we did that, then we got our first peek at the survey, if you will. And holy cow, there was a lot of stuff there. I'm sure it was still over 100 questions back then too. But what I started learning through the journey and through the process was we had a lot of good programs already, but we were really, really bad at communicating those programs to the drivers. So as we went through and answered all the questions in the survey, I was like, well, we do that. Oh, we do this. And, started checking things off. But when you go out and you talk to drivers about it, they go, well, I didn't know you guys did that. So we were horrible at the communication part of the programs we already had.
Interesting. And that is one of the things that we've seen over the years with the program, is that a lot of that effort to get from a nominee to a participant to a finalist and into the top 20 is really about figuring out what your story is and how to tell your story, and making sure that everybody in the company is on the same page with that. So there are lots of cases where people are doing things that they don't realize they're doing, or they don't really think about it, so they don't really communicate it, or they're not sure how to talk about it. And that becomes one of the biggest challenges, is getting everybody on side and understanding what it is that makes this culture distinct. So yeah, so you started with that when you went in there the first year, realized that you needed to communicate. I think you guys made the top 20 the first year you were in the program. So obviously you figured it out pretty quickly. What are some of the things that you saw changing? That was a long time ago. That was probably, like 10, 12 years ago. What are some of the things that you saw changing in the industry, and how do you stay on top of that?
When I think back, some of the things that I distinctly remember was, how we as companies handled drivers with things like downtime, layover, detention. And from what I recall, everything was a policy. And that's kind of how you run the truck line. Every truck line has their driver handbook, which is probably an outline of the policies and how they're going to conduct their day-to-day business. But if I jump forward to today and I think how we run it differently today compared to 10 years ago, I would say, the policies are still there, but it's more of a guideline. And what you learn to do over time is you have to take care of these people. And those policies that are in black and white don't always do that. You can't fit them to every scenario that your driver's up against. And once you start to learn that, you start treating them like people and what's the right thing to do for the driver in this situation, then you just take care of them. It may or may not follow the policy, but you also have to be able to have a team that you start to communicate that with. When you think about your dispatch and your operations group that deal with those drivers day to day, if they're still doing everything by the book, so to speak, it's a challenge. You probably got some unhappy drivers, and as soon as they hang up the phone with you, that driver might be saying, well, that was unfair, that doesn't fit, that doesn't seem correct. So that was the mindset shift for us over the years was, yeah, the policy manuals are there, but just do the right thing for your people and start taking care of them.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we do see happening as companies kind of mature. They kind of move from a reliance on policy to more of a focus on process that comes out of that policy, and thinking about, okay, well, what do we really want to do here? What is the right thing in this particular situation? And can we back up that decision? And what is the impact of that going to be? And it sounds like you're kind of going through that same sort of approach. One of the things that is a challenge often, though, is there's an inherent conflict sometimes that comes up with that. So you may have the policy that isn't really working, but you've got people that are following that policy and adhering to it. So how do you deal with some of those conflicts that come up as a result of trying to deviate from that baseline in order to accommodate a special case?
Well, and I think that's the importance of when you go down this best fleets journey. It's about you involve the whole team from day one. And I'm thinking about our internal staff that are making the decisions for the drivers every day. But if you bring them into the loop and they start to understand why you're doing what you do, then you have a better shot at it. But that the issues are going to come if you have a dispatcher that doesn't understand what you're trying to do to change your culture or move your culture forward. You're not going to get very far. So it's got to start at the top, and it needs to be all the way through the organization.
Mm-hmm. Now, if that's the process that you had sort of early on when you first got into the Best Fleets program, the program changes every year, and in order to stay on that list, as Grand Island did, and as now Chief Carriers is starting to do, you have to keep adjusting. You have to keep moving because everybody is sort of racing towards that same goal line. So how do you stay relevant? How do you figure out what things to change and keep your process moving forward?
Well, I think that's true. It's, the bar moves on you every year. And if you think, you're going to make the top 21 time and then continue to submit the same answers year after year, you're probably not going to stay in the top 20 very long. But for us, it's, I think it's just a creativity and kind of naturally I have an innovative mind, and I'm always looking for new and better ways. And I kind of had a funny story just in the last year or so, working with the team here at Chief, is sometimes I can bring so much to the table that I just overwhelm them with ideas and stuff. And like, hold on, somebody's got to put this stuff into play. These are good ideas, but they can't keep up. And I had to recognize that myself and pull back just a little bit and give them time to implement the ideas and implement them correctly.
That's a really interesting point, because we definitely see people that try and do too much too fast. So how do you figure out, what things should be done now? What's an appropriate pace for things? How do you balance that need to change things with need to manage that change and do it at a pace that people can adopt without feeling overwhelmed or feeling like there's too much?
Well, we happen to run our business on a platform called EOS, and it's been kind of a game changer for us because it helped us with things just like that. So we don't get overwhelmed, but we kind of, according to EOS, we live in a 90-day world, if you will, meaning we're meeting every quarter as a leadership team. We're picking out what those next 90 days look like and what we're going to accomplish. And when you do that, when you break it down to the 90 days, you can actually execute those things the way you need to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. A lot of people get wrapped up in like an annual plan or a 5-year plan, and there are so many black swans that come along that plan gets either thrown out the door or they focus on it and end up missing opportunities or going in the wrong direction. So 90 days is an interesting time frame. It's long enough to have some time to work on things, but not so long that your world could change completely in that time, or it's
Yeah,
less likely to.
it's
Yeah.
about all you can handle at one time is 90 days. I can think out
Yeah.
that far and I can execute, but
Yeah.
if I get past that, it is overwhelming for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So when you moved to Chief Carriers, you wanted to start bringing a new company in, you knew that you wanted to get them involved. Take us through that thought process of, why bring Chief Carriers into the Best Fleets program, and what did you do to get started with that?
It was pretty interesting. So I stepped in to this chief role in the fall of 2018. And that would have been right in the middle about nomination season for
Mm-hmm.
Best Fleets that first year. And I was like, oh, there's no way. They're
Mm-hmm.
not ready for it. And I had also kind of told myself when I stepped into this new role, I said, I'm going to kick back for 90 days and I'm not going to make any changes. I'm going to observe and respect what they've built here, and see if there's things that need to change. So the next year would have been 2019. We did the survey for the first time and we did not get in. And one of the things I did, the leadership team that was here at the time, we went through the Best Fleet process. So I'd gotten hold of a book and I essentially benchmarked Chief of where I thought we were at compared to the top 20. And you can kind of do that if you look at the book. And when the leadership team thought they were in really good shape and thought they were running things correctly, they kind of got an eye opener there about how far away we really were from that top 20 group. So that was the start of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's another thing that we see happening, where people think that they're in really good shape and then they go through it and they get their scores and they are unpleasantly surprised. And it's tough. Tough when we're sort of going through and scoring these people, and not everybody can make it to the top 20, of course. But that book has a lot of information in it, and I'm always surprised at the number of people that go into the program having never read the previous year's book, having never looked at the previous year's results that are all published. I mean, you pick up a hard copy at the convention, but there are soft copies on the website, and I think there's a lot of information in there that people can learn, and that's a great idea to kind of benchmark the company and see, where do we think we're doing well, where are the places that we haven't even really thought of? Because that's another thing that comes up, is there's questions on there that people often have not even really asked themselves. They're not even really looked at. What do we do in some of these areas? And were there particular things that jumped out to you in this particular situation when you came into Chief that you looked at and said, okay, well, we've got a big gap here, or things that we hadn't really looked at?
Yeah, one of the things that jumps out at me was the benefit waiting period. And Chief Carriers is part of a company called Chief Industries that has a total of 7 business units. So when it comes to the HR functions and stuff that's really handled over at the corporate or the parent level, and we were at a 90-day waiting period on benefits. And so even going through the process and, like I say, benchmarking ourselves against others, I truly believe that's what helped Chief change to a 30-day wait period. And it took a couple of years to get there. But it was a presentation to the HR director over there and say, listen, we're just not competitive in some of these areas. And here's the proof. Here's what the best in the industry are doing. Here's where we're at. I really need your help with some things. Now, there may have been pressure from other divisions as well, as everybody's challenged to hire people and get them in the door. But I do think that the Best Fleets helped us change that policy here at Chief Carriers.
Interesting. So when you're going through that process of looking at the book and sort of benchmarking yourself against it and realizing you've got some things that need to be changed, what do you find are the hardest things to change?
It always starts with the buy-in at the top. I'm thinking about how, if you have any prayer of making the change, hopefully the senior leadership's getting involved in the program to start, because if you task it to maybe just a mid-level manager or something like that, I think you're really going to have a hard time, not only getting the buy-in from the company, but getting anything changed if you need to. So the hardest thing is probably just the sell. I can remember that first year I did the benchmark thing here at Chief, and the leadership team, they weren't really buying into it. You just told them well, you guys aren't as good as we probably need to be on this list. And they're like, kind of, well, what do we need this list for? They didn't understand the process. And it was kind of an ego buster, I guess, for a lot of people, just to walk in and essentially say that we're not doing everything we need to do. We need to get better at our jobs. Nobody wants to hear that. Everybody's going to be a little defensive with that.
Yeah, well, that's a subject that I see coming up a fair bit, where you have a company that's got pretty decent safety record, doesn't really have a lot of turnover issues, and driver satisfaction is good. So they look at it and say, well, we're doing fine. Business is profitable. People aren't leaving. We're not hitting things. Why do we need to change anything? And we see that a fair bit, where there's companies that may score well in those areas, but don't do well in terms of the overall programs that they're offering or the effort that they're making. And my answer to those people is always the same, is like, eventually you're going to have to hire some people. Your drivers are going to retire. You're going to need to make some changes. You're going to need to start recruiting, and you're going to be so far behind everybody else at that point, because all of these things that people are doing are becoming standard practice, and you're not really doing any of them. You're going to be out to lunch. So you're going to have a real hard time. So there's a point to putting that time in and making that effort now, even if you don't need to hire people or do a lot of recruiting type work. There's still value in having all of those things there, still remaining competitive, because a lot of that stuff also still improves efficiency. Even if you're not hiring today, it will still improve your efficiency today. You have a better team, you communicate better, and we've seen lots of stories of best fleets that have really good opportunities uncovered because they've been talking to the drivers, they've been going through this kind of collaborative process, and it ends up paying off. So I can totally see why you go to a management team and they're like, well, you're just telling us that we need to do better, but the metrics that we've been using show that I'm doing fine. So why should I listen to you? It is tougher to get them involved. I can totally see that.
Well, and going back to that idea about benchmarking, we do that every year. And I did that when I was still with GIX too, but it's, you make the top 20. It's fantastic if you're an overall winner. It's probably not something you're really striving for. It's just staying in that top 20 list every year. But you come home, you celebrate after convention, and you celebrate with your team a little bit, take a month or two off, and then you're right back in the grind, because you better jump into that scorebook. You've only got a couple months ahead of you before it's nomination time again in the fall. So you maybe have 6 months to get something done. But we do that every year, and we'll do it again this year. I'll benchmark ourselves in a spreadsheet, kind of nerd out, and put the scores in there against the other small carriers. And I might include the large carriers too, but it's like, where are we really falling short compared to what the others have already figured out? And that's how you continuously improve. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel or come up with new stuff, but you can see what other carriers are doing and then figure out, how do I apply that here at our company? It doesn't have to be, you don't have to copy what they're doing, but take the idea and make it fit within your own organization.
Yeah. Well, that's a good approach, because a lot of the times I find the things that people are doing that really work well are not that complicated. They're not really expensive. It's just a matter of thinking about it or having that idea. And I come back to one idea of yours that I took and shared with many people, and it got adopted pretty widely, and that was the rate my load thing on the operational side. When drivers drop off a load, that they get to rate it, give it to however many stars and comments they like. And your explanation at the time is like, well, every time I get something from Amazon, they immediately give me like this rating option, and I can tell them how well it went. So we started doing the same for the drivers. And I was like, wow, that's a great idea. It's simple. it gives you immediate feedback, and it's something that the whole team can benefit from. And so I started talking about it, and many people stole your idea. Because once you have the idea, there are different ways to implement it, but there are a lot of benefits that come from that.
Yeah, and I think there's even a dispatch software company that's picked up on that somehow, because now it's part of a mobile app. But
Yeah.
that's all right. That's great stuff. And that was exactly right. The idea came from somewhere outside of trucking, but I was like, man, wouldn't this be beneficial? Because the whole idea of that, it forced the two parties to work together for better resolution. And, if you've got a buyer rating and a seller rating, you want that thing to be 5 stars. So you're always going to try to work together to figure out how you get the most stars out of that.
Well, that also is kind of becoming standard across like everything now. Everything that you do, somebody's poking you to do a review afterwards. You go to the grocery store and they want you to do a survey and please give me 5 stars. You have a plumber come by and they want 5 stars on Google. It's not just your Uber drivers and things like that. So that's just one of those places where it subtly moves trucking into more of a modern place and helps bring people in, because new people coming in see that it's, the trucking industry on the outside may look different, but when you get in there, it's actually operating a lot like everything else. I've got a rating system, I've got communication, I've got all of these tools that are pretty much like any other industry. So there are a lot of subtle benefits that come from things like that. And yeah, taking the idea and being creative with it works really well. And that's also kind of going into a bit of a different direction. One of the things that I see people often struggle with is the internal barriers between sort of office staff and drivers. And, drivers are out there, you don't communicate with them very much. They're often physically separated. So how do you break down those barriers and get everybody working together as a management team? How do you get that intel from the field that only drivers can provide, but how do you communicate to drivers what you're doing and why you're doing it? So the fleets that really figure out ways to break down those barriers and get the team working together are usually the fleets that have a much better result. So the rating system is one of those. Town halls, surveys, those kind of things that I think you've done a fair bit of over the years are great ways to help that out. So was that something that was already in place at Chief when you started those kind of communication things, or did you add those in?
Funny you should ask. No, I have a story about that, actually. So I mentioned I started in the fall of 2018, and we had a brand new terminal. So this building was 1 month old when I started. It's almost like they built it just for me. It was fantastic. But so in the drivers have an entrance of their own where they park and they come in out of a safety lane, and they'll walk through a driver entrance. And they have on one side, they had a dispatch window. The other side of it, they had a maintenance window where they could report maintenance. And then they had access to a driver lounge 24/7. But what I had noticed was all the doors were closed in this office, like in the hallways. So the drivers were really quarantined to just coming in their entrance and had access to their lounge and, facilities and stuff like that. But they certainly weren't allowed anywhere else in the rest of the office. So I went through this process. My first week here, I would go out every morning. I'd kick doors open. I'd put the little wedge in by the carpet to hold the door open. And it would be an hour later and the doors are closed. I'm like, what is going on around this place? So finally I had to pull the ops guy aside at the time. And I says, hey, why are these doors shut? He's like, well, we don't want drivers around in here. I says, what do you mean you don't want drivers around in here? This is what we do. Well, they bother us, or they're disturbing, or they're looking over our shoulders, and all these things going on. I said, listen, the drivers are going to have access to this whole building, so you just as well get used to it. So that's what I'm talking about when I said it's important from the top down to have that buy-in. If you don't have that, if the owner, the CEO, the president, whatever it is in your company doesn't feel like that, it's going to be hard to break down those silos.
And that's a great example of where there's often inherent conflict, because people are so used to doing it a certain way, used to this mindset of separation or their own policies or whatever. You have to sort of go through that process and take the time to get them comfortable with something different so that they don't try and undermine it in a bunch of subtle ways that sort of defeat all of the stuff you're working on. You've got a great idea for a program. You need to make sure that they actually buy into it and understand the value of it so that they actually execute it and they keep doing it even when you're not watching them. And that's the big challenge for a lot of times, I think.
Well, and it's, I keep talking about the buy-in from everything. And to be honest with you, we've changed most of our leadership team here in the last 4 years. And that wasn't something you walk in expect to do in a company, but I was pretty clear about how we were going to run things here and how we were going to treat drivers in the direction we were going. And some people just couldn't get on board with that. And they decided that chief wasn't the right place for them. And I agreed. So you bring in people that are like-minded and you start to build that team. I always think about, any football program in America, when they have a head coach change, not many of the assistants stick around. They want to bring in their own team, their own leaders that think like they do and will buy into the program.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I was just watching on Thursday night. Moneyball was on TV, and I've seen it, 50 times. But it was just happened to be that section where the GM can't get the coach to start the players that he wants, and the coach is stuck in the old ways. So he goes and trades all those players so that there's no option but to start the ones that he wants. So you've got to sometimes force people, and sometimes they buy into it, and sometimes they don't. But you've got to find the right mindset there. And yeah, that makes a big difference, getting the people who believe it. And it's the same thing with the drivers, I find. We look at retention scores, so we look at the turnover and things like that, but having great retention isn't necessarily an indicator of a fantastic company, because when you are making a lot of these changes, there are going to be some drivers that don't support them and don't really buy into it, and sometimes they're not a good fit for the company either. So we will see in a lot of cases where the company will start making a lot of changes, start sort of implementing more modern programs, and their turnover will actually spike for a little bit. And then it will settle down once they've got that match of people that are really a good fit for them. Same thing when they make an acquisition. They'll acquire another company. Turnover ends up spiking a little bit because some of those drivers really don't want to follow the new rules.
Yeah, we experienced the same thing with the drivers too. I think the 2020 model year trucks, which would have been bought in 2019, we started putting the safety features on them with the radar and the automatic braking and things like that. And boy, did we have some pushback from a handful of drivers that they just thought they didn't need stuff like that. And they aren't going to drive for a company that's doing that. You're not going to tell me how to do this or that. And those drivers kind of weeded themselves out. And when I look at today, what we have for professional drivers compared to where we were 5 years ago, oh my gosh, it's a world of difference. And we're in such a better place because you've been able to weed out those drivers that had the negative outlook on everything.
Yeah. I mean, everybody talks about turnover as such a horrible issue in the industry, but turnover isn't all bad. And there are some positive types of turnover to not be afraid of, really. So that's good. So another sort of question coming out of the sort of baseline questions that we have for you in your very specific history, advice that you would give to a company who wants to be in the best fleets program and wants to be on the top 20. So at this point, I have to imagine that people ask you sort of, what your process is and how you do things. So what advice do you typically give, or what would you suggest people do if they're interested in getting involved?
First of all, I think we've said it before, but it's commitment from the top so that you have the authority to do whatever you need. And it's really about whoever's going to run that program or who's going to be your champion and move forward with that. Give that person autonomy to do that, because one of the things that can happen is if you get that person in there and they're trying to make some positive changes for your group, and then all of a sudden the top level leadership kind of cuts them off at the knees and say, we're not going to do this or we're not going to do that. You're not going to get very far in the process itself. Communication with transparency is huge. Over the years, we talk a lot about how everybody's got their private Facebook pages and videos have become a big thing now, podcasts and things like that. But that's all part of it, is the way you communicate, throughout the entire organization and talk to them about what your intent is and make sure you follow through and update them often so they know what's going on. Because if you don't tell them, they're going to make it up right in the corner of the driver's lounge or at the truck stop or something like that. And you certainly don't want obstacles like that.
So you just touched on something. Well, you kind of glossed over it actually, and I think it is a very critical point. You talked about getting involved and whoever is your internal champion, give them autonomy to do things. But there's a couple of assumptions baked into that I think a lot of people miss. We see people get involved in the program and they will assign an internal champion, and that person's job really is to fill out the questionnaire, go and collect the information, fill out the questionnaire, and then that's kind of it. But that's not the kind of internal champion you're talking about. Like, that person is just collecting data and entering it in a form, and that doesn't really get you anywhere. You need to have somebody who takes that to the next level and says, okay, this is where we've got to make some changes. This is where we've got some gaps that we need to do some things. That's the person who needs to have a bit of a mandate to work through those things and the autonomy to make the changes. I think that's where you're talking about the autonomy. But if you don't have that next step baked into your mindset that we are going to take this information and do something with it, you're really kind of wasting your time. You're just filling out a form and going through an interview, but you're not really going to get very much out of it, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think, if a company was stepping into it for the very first year, it would be extremely difficult to think you're going to make the list. But that very first year is kind of a fact-finding mission, if you will. Do the survey, figure out where you're at, kind of benchmark yourself against the other carriers that are in the top 20. Then take that benchmark and go to your leadership team and say, here's what I've learned from the process, and here's some areas where I think we could easily fix some things or improve some things that don't even cost any money. It's just an approach. But if you take that approach where every year you're going to improve a handful of things, I think you'll get yourself to that top 20 level.
90-day increments, right?
That's exactly right.
You go through the list in 90-day increments and fix one thing at a time. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. Excellent advice. Excellent insights. So that kind of comes to the end of the formal questions that I had. Any other thoughts or comments that you wanted to add about the program or your process as you go through it while we come to the end here?
Just, if you're not involved in the program, get involved. It is absolutely the best program on the planet. And I always try to tell people, I says, it's the best fleets to drive for, but it's really a reflection of how your team, your internal team, operates the business. Because you may have the ideas, you might be innovative or, the idea guy like me, but if you can't get your internal team to execute on those ideas, you're not going to go very far. But when you stand up there on stage with that top 20 and you look around and you understand you're standing up there with the best of the best in the industry, it's a pretty special moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a good observation, that for it to really work, it needs to be sort of a management-wide effort. Everybody needs to be on the same page. Everybody needs to be working together towards a common goal. So it ends up being kind of a business efficiency thing or business collaboration project as well. So it's kind of the output of all of these other activities, or the output of all of these other benefits that gets you onto that stage. Yeah.
And I have a help first attitude about stuff. I love to talk best fleets. So I'm not opposed to, if you reach out to me or see me at a convention or something like that, I'd love to sit down with you and see how I can help your group too.
Nice. Okay. Well, that is a great place to wrap this up. So thanks very much, Andy. This has been very enlightening, illuminating as usual. Lots of good insights, and have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Mark. Take care.